Evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Twins Ticket. I am Tom Frumming. The channel is TF Twins. Here are the topics that we're going to go run down. Going to talk a bit about today's spring training game, a little bit about Brooks Lee, Jorge Alcala, and really whatever else you want to talk about. How's it going? Again, welcome to the stream. Thanks for joining us. My name is Tom, and we'll pull up the live chat here. So anybody joining live, there we go. Can chat here. I see Gabriel caught me before we get that up there. How's it going? Thanks for dropping by. So today, the spring training game, I always love to be sharing those highlights. Unfortunately, no highlights from that game. But the Twins did play the Dominican Republic's WBC roster. So that was a cool opportunity to play in that exhibition. What's up, Marty Jason? ON. Thanks for hanging out. And yeah, that was embarrassing first. I just got to get the chat up. That was on me. That was on me. You were quicker than I could be. We'll learn from next time. But thanks everybody for hanging out. We'll jump right into it. The Twins, they won today 2-1 against, again, that Dominican Republic WBC roster. Not a super eventful game. But lots of good Twins pitching, as you would imagine, from a 2-1 game. And here's all the scoring rundown. This was it. Jose Miranda reached on an error that scored Kyle Farmer. Joey Gallo drove Miranda in. Those are the only two runs in the bottom of the fourth for the Twins. The only run the Twins gave up were a wild pitch by Oliver Ortega. Somebody had mentioned earlier, it seems like there's been lots of run scoring on wild pitches, and it's kind of funny the very next day there was. Because the Twins won on a walk-off wild pitch the other day. Another game that didn't have a broadcast available. We'll get to Lee. All right. And kind of just speaking some more on today's exhibition game. Again, this was against a Dominican roster that started at least a real very major league heavy lineup. Kind of a cool thing. This is what I pulled up here is the pitching, but what kind of a cool thing is a lot of the Twins Dominican minor leaguers got to get in at the end of the game, when their regulars didn't need to really play a full game and get out there. The most notable of which was Manuel Rodriguez. So that was pretty cool. Anyway, the kind of biggest takeaway for the Twins out of this game today was Sonny Gray. Would have loved to have seen him pitch 3 perfect innings with 4 strikeouts, again, against a good-looking Dominican lineup. So Sonny Gray, saw some, I wish I remember which reporter it was, but somebody wrote a really good article or shared some quotes from Sonny Gray about how he just couldn't ramp up last year. That everything, remember we were in a lockout still, I think up until tomorrow, the 10th last year. And, Sonny Gray was expecting to have more of an heads up between the lockout ending and spring starting. So he hadn't really ramped up and just had a hard time getting ramped up. And then, of course, I think he was on the DL like 3 times last year. Pitched really well. Sonny Gray did for the Twins last year, but, didn't pitch as much as maybe he would have liked to. And, again, kind of on and off the IL quite a few times last year. So we'll see, with this more normal spring training, if he continues to roll. Yeah, Sonny Gray. I like it. Cy Young. Sonny. I like it. That's a good nickname. We need some more nicknames for these guys. All right. So then, of course, following Gray, as you see, Caleb Thielbar. This was his second outing. Good to see him just out there. Griffin Jacks, who's looked tremendous. Brent Hedrick had a nice outing where he recorded 5 outs. Jeff Hoffman, who we'll kind of talk a little bit more about in a moment. And then Oliver Ortega gave up that 1 run on the wild pitch, walk to batter. But overall, 9 innings pitched, 4 hits, 1 walk, and 11 strikeouts. Man, that is an impressive, I don't care if it's spring training or what, but that is a nice performance out of the pitching staff. And let's take a look at some of Sonny Gray's metrics. This was at Hammond Stadium, so even though we didn't have a broadcast, we do have the Baseball Savant data. And I mean, this is basically what the baseball savant data is looking like for most of the Twins starting pitchers, at least. Just red all over the place, numbers up. Sonny Gray topped out at 94.3 miles per hour, which is very good for him. And he averaged on his fastball 1.3 miles per hour above what it was last year on his four seamer. So you can see a lot of those other pitches were comfortably above what he averaged last season. So, here we are on March 9th, Sonny Gray not only, getting into more of a regular kind of feel, kind of rotation, ramp up, but also throwing harder than usual. So this is pretty cool. Sonny Gray in a contract year, so he's got a lot of motivation to pitch well. I mean, guys always do, but some extra motivation. And I mentioned Hoffman. Let's pull up his numbers real quick. Oh, I accidentally hit something. I hope you can still hear me. Jeff Hoffman. You may remember that name as a former starting pitcher for the Colorado Rockies. Obviously, a tough place to pitch. He went to Cincinnati. He's been there the last couple of years. There's another guy that's showing a lot more. This was only his second outing this spring. In his first outing, he got knocked around a bit. But just kind of want to throw this guy out there. He's not on the 40-man roster. He's not, projected to make the opening day roster or anything, but intrigued. Color me intrigued. Topped out at 97.6 miles per hour, average 96.4. That's up. Velo is up. And maybe the most impressive thing is he got 6 swinging strikes. Just 21 pitches, and he had 6 swinging strikes. So 6 of the 11 swings were strikes. So Jeff Hoffman, not really a name to be a dark horse to make the opening day roster at this point, but just a name to put in your back pocket. Maybe a Sire Fort Myers name to keep in mind. Although he did give up some runs in his first outing, that's going to hurt his case there. But just another guy who kind of caught my eye today. There's usually somebody, there's all the main guys, and then guys like Jeff Hoffman. They say spring training doesn't matter. I would say yes for anyone who has a job at the major league level. Spring training really doesn't matter. The stats don't really matter that much. You'd rather see guys pitch well. I saw Dylan Cease gave up like 11 runs or something. I think it was 9 runs on 11 hits for the White Sox. I think he was the AL Cy Young runner-up last year. Not gonna, again, you can't read too much into spring. So I don't think that means too much, but you'd rather see a Sonny Gray outing for sure than a Dylan Cease one. So yeah, that is true. There are a lot of former Reds players on the Twins right now. And of course, part of it is they've traded for Sonny Gray and Tyler Mahle. But yeah, there are some other ones, and Donovan Solano. There are kind of all Kyle Farmer. it is. They saw the C, the C, and they're like, well, you're halfway there. We'll just put the T on there. We're good to go then. All right, so that was most of what I wanted to talk about from today's game. Again, Twins won 2-1 against the Dominican Republic's WBC roster. They're ramping up, much like you may have seen Team USA. We actually lost to the Giants in an exhibition game. So it doesn't mean too much. These teams, just like the major league teams, are just ramping up, getting some work in. But something I did want to discuss a little further was Brooks Lee. And somebody brought up Brooks Lee earlier. I've had some questions on Brooks Lee as far as kind of his timeline, and he's looking really good, looked pretty good last year. But kind of just to remember, let's keep in mind that this guy was drafted just last year. I'm going to be the wet blanket. Somebody mentioned, I think it was ON mentioned, third base is not a guarantee. Jose Miranda did play today. He got another hard hit ball. And his shoulder's doing better. It sounds like he's started throwing, not like regular infield drills, but he's throwing. But that's certainly, they have other options at third base with Kyle Farmer in particular. Probably some guys beyond him, Nick Gordon, we're not sure on his status yet, but it's not as if third base is a lock. And, if we look across the diamond at first base, Alex Kirilloff is quite a question mark himself. You could just put Miranda at first for a while he heals up or whatever. And if Kirilloff's healthy, DH him. The Twins don't have a set DH. So I mean, Brooks Lee, if you want to kind of play that moving pieces game and try to figure out if you want to make him fit on the opening day roster, you can play that game. Absolutely. Just because Correa's back doesn't mean that any shortstop in the organization is completely blocked. So, keep that in mind. But again, Brooks Lee was just in college last year. Beyond that was at Cal Poly, a big West school, not a big conference. That doesn't disqualify him from anything. But I do feel like he needs some more time playing 6 days a week, which is also something they don't do in college. I know he has some experience in the summer leagues, like the Northwoods League. I think he played in the Cape Cod League one year too. So he's done some of that, but I think the way I put it to somebody is if you're a team that intends to contend, putting a guy like this with this little experience in an everyday lineup, it's just kind of a bigger risk than you want to take when you have some better options. Even if Kyle Farmer would be like the option, like if we're playing that what if scenario in which, there is a big everyday job opening, excuse me. I think you would rather give it to one of the guys that's been around a little bit longer. But if he plays well and stays healthy, again, a lot of people have kind of assumed that since Correa is blocking him or Royce Lewis or whatever, I don't see it that way at all in terms of them getting to the major leagues. Now, obviously, he's blocking them at shortstop. But, we could see Brooks Lee this year. We absolutely could see Brooks Lee this year. And that's sort of the fun thing is remember, and I haven't given my predictions yet, and I'm not ready to today, just to pump the brakes on that. We'll do that sometime. I think we've got 3 more weeks until opening day still. So I'll definitely get to that sometime over the next 3 weeks. But remember, this roster is going to evolve a ton every year. Every team really evolves quite a bit. But we're going to see Royce Lewis. We're going to see Royce Lewis on the Twins this year. I think it's kind of so far kind of out of our minds. And none of the opening day analysis. You're kind of looking at the roster as is. We're going to see Royce Lewis this year. I'm not sure, where it's going to be. I'm not sure, in what, he's obviously going to need a ramp up time. He's obviously going to need some time in AAA to get back. But we're going to see him. And I think, this even seems premature. Again, I was trying to kind of pump the brakes on a Brooks Lee opening day. I think there's a 0% chance that's going to happen. But I do think we're going to see him this year on the Twins, which is crazy enough as it is. In his first full season of being a professional baseball player, I think there's a great chance we're going to see him at the major league level, which is just bananas. So, I mean, we already can look at this Twins roster and think about how much depth they have just as is. But if you kind of factor in Royce Lewis is going to be here, Brooks Lee is going to be an option, a more realistic option down the line. Now, of course, on the flip side of the coin, they're probably going to lose some guys too who are healthy now. That's just the way it goes. But, we'll kind of roll with it as we go. But I wanted to share this over at the Athletic. Aaron Gleeman did a mailbag. So I'm giving away just a teeny sliver of that. Go ahead and support the Athletic. Dan and Aaron do great work over there. But he was asked about Brooks Lee and gave this response. I'm going to take a real quick break while you guys read that. Sorry, that was a beer and burp break. And yeah, I share this because I think that I agree with what Aaron is saying here. And there was more to this answer. And there's a lot more to this piece, this mailbag. He answered a ton of questions, tons of good stuff in there. But Aaron says, he's assuming Lee will start out at AA Wichita. And, he's not really expecting him to go to AAA. Yeah, I would agree with that. And, makes mention that Lee really only played a handful, 6 games at AA. So, yes, he reached AA, sure, but he only played 6 games, and he actually DH'd, I think, most, if not all of them. I'm not sure if he played in the field in any of those 6. So, it wasn't like he, when you say, well, he reached AA, it's not like he was really there for very long. And then again, it was sort of it's not like he was playing in every day, because he was mostly in the postseason there in AA. Jason asked if any players make the jump to AAA that stand out. A lot of the guys we saw last year, at the end of last year, the Louis Varlands, the Simeon Woods Richardsons, we saw them last year. And like AAA is not really a required, like take Simeon Woods Richardson, for example. He was in AA most of the year, was in AAA a short amount of time, and then was in the majors. Same with Louis Varland, really. It's not like guys need some kind of big runway in AAA before you get into the majors. I think they're, in terms of talent, just talent, there might be more talent in AA than AAA. It's a bit more refined in AAA. Guys have a better plan in AAA. A lot of the AAA guys have been in the big leagues, and then they've come back down again, or are former big leaguers trying to get back. But I don't think it's not a requirement to spend a lot of time in AAA. So Brooks Lee starting the year in AA doesn't really, it's not like, oh, well, he's got to have 40 games in AAA or whatever. It really doesn't, it really doesn't. It's not going to slow him down at all. But in terms of guys in AAA, it's a lot of most of the guys we saw in St. Paul that we didn't see with the Twins, who are kind of knocking on the door a bit, would be a lot of kind of non-prospect guys. I hate to say that term, but guys who are like in their 26th season, your Michael Hellmans, your Chris Williamses, guys like that. But yeah, those are the 2 that kind of jumped out that were playing real well in St. Paul. Sort of Mark Contreras, like, guys who will be sort of up and down. They'll be major leaguers potentially, but they won't really, probably won't carve out a huge role. So that was Brooks Lee. I see we already have some people. We have some Emilio Pagan panic. We have some Christian Encarnacion panic. That's great. Emilio Pagan, I don't really know what else I have to say. I mean, there's nothing else to say. I think I've said it the last 50 times I've talked about Emilio Pagan. I don't get it either. I don't get it. The only saving grace is at least the last 2 months of last season, they put him nowhere near high leverage. He was pitching in all low leverage. So hopefully we see that again, because I think I'm just under the assumption we're along for the ride here, at least until, I don't know, late May. That would be my guess. He can, but hopefully, again, if they're only using him in low leverage, it doesn't matter that much. You would rather, maybe see a young guy get an opportunity to pitch at the big league level and get comfortable in that role. But hopefully it won't hurt that much. I don't get why he's still here, though. I can't answer that question anymore. There's no amount of stuff or advanced data or Rapsodo, TrackMan, Hawkeye stuff that can make up for just grooving fastballs down the middle. So yeah, I really don't have much else to say about that. Encarnacion Strand, I mean, the guy's gonna mash. Dude's gonna mash, but it's spring training. How many plate appearances is it? Like 30? It's probably against a lot of AAA type guys. He's gonna hit. I'm not saying he's not gonna hit. And think about it this way, I would kind of twist that conversation into the Twins turned a 4th round pick into a guy that they could use in a deal to get Tyler Mahle, an established MLB starting pitcher. I think that's an organizational win for them. If you look back, fourth round, you don't get a whole lot of value out of the fourth round for the most part. It was a great pick on their part. I don't think he's going to be able to play third base. I really don't. I think he's going to be a first baseman, so he's going to have to mash. Now, we're in a spot where the Twins don't really have a first baseman that's really I feel good about at the moment, but Alex Kirilloff can certainly erase those questions. Joey Gallo could really erase those questions himself if they want to stick him there. So we'll see. And it's a long game. We'll see with Encarnacion Stand. I love that Ansley mentions Akil Baddoo. Everybody was kind of assuming that Baddoo was the next David Ortiz for the first about month he was in the majors. Was just on fire for the Tigers. And we see that a lot, Miguel Sano was looked like a future Twins Hall of Famer his first half season. And look what happened to him. It's a game of adjustments. It's going to be tough. And Encarnacion Strand has a lot of swing and miss in his game. And, that's kind of going to be what helps him sink or swim. But I can tell you though, with all that said, that guy hitting in Cincinnati, that's a great park to hit in. That might be a nice kind of marriage between them. If they want to just take Encarnacion Strand and put him in a first base DH platoon with Joey Votto or something, maybe it doesn't happen this year, but I think he could be a nice piece for them. So, and we'll root for him. He was our guy. We loved watching him. I've watched him on like an everyday basis before the trade. And absolutely loved it. He was so much fun, especially in Cedar Rapids. So wishing him certainly all the success. Seems like a pretty pleasant guy, pretty good dude. But you got to give something to get some. You got to give something to get something. The Twins had to give up Luis Ariz in the Pablo Lopez trade. Obviously, they got some nice prospects in that deal. But if you're asking me, would I do that trade over again? Absolutely. Starting pitching is tough. It's really hard. You can devote a lot of, Carlos Rodon just today, Carlos Rodon and, Frankie Montas. Frankie Montas, who we all wanted, he's who knows what he's going to start the year on the injured list. I don't know what's going on with him. Might not see him for a real long time. And Carlos Rodon, he's going to start the year on the injured list, and we'll see. Hopefully that's a minor thing. We'll see. Pitching is just so difficult to acquire and keep healthy these days. It's crazy. Yeah, some Edouard Julien mentions. Yeah, don't forget about that guy. He's playing with Team Canada, Julien, so he's kind of going to be a little bit out of sight, out of mind, especially if you're not watching the WBC, which you should be if you're not. It's kind of weird. I woke up this morning and watched Cuba play, and I'm going to go to bed tonight watching Cuba play. This time difference. I think their game starts like 10:30 locally here. But anyway, Edouard Julien playing for Team Canada. He'll be back. He'll be back before probably too long. And a guy who's looking really good. And at least he can play second. I don't think he's a great second baseman, but he is a useful second baseman, I guess is how I could put it. You can put him there at the major league level at second base and get away with it, kind of is what I would say. And too, he looks like he's had a little bit more zip on his throws this spring, which obviously helps there. William asked about Austin Martin, and we're going to talk about Jorge Alcala. That was my other topic I want to discuss. We're going to get to him in just a minute. I want to get through a couple of these chats. No, I don't think Austin Martin and Brooks Lee. You got to remember there is a ton of guys in AAA. We mentioned Michael Hellman, Elliot Soto's a guy. If you've been watching spring games, you might have noticed he's going to be there. There's just a lot of guys who are like not prospects, who are minor league free agent signings. Willie Castro is another one, probably. I don't think he'll make the opening day roster. It would take a couple injuries. So really, when you're thinking about the minor league levels, AAA, it's pretty much going to be guys who've been in the major leagues, guys who are older, it's not really a prospect league anymore. Your prospects are going to be in Double A unless they're like on a ramp up, and then maybe a month at that. I think that's the plan. That's nobody wants to be in AAA a real long time before they get to the major leagues. I think, and it depends. It kind of can depend. I don't know this firsthand. I've never been in a AAA clubhouse on a day-to-day basis, but nobody wants to be there. Nobody wants to be in AAA, right? You might say, well, nobody wants to be in AA. Yeah, everybody wants to be in the majors, but there can be a different vibe in AAA that some teams actually protect their prospects from being around that situation. So, Kalai Rosario, let's talk about him because he's another guy that has probably caught a lot of people's eyes. He is a strikeout machine, and he might be the worst. I feel bad. I feel bad for throwing this at a young guy who's hitting well in spring training and impressive. Let's start with that. Let's do like the compliment sandwich thing. Because he's like 20, right? So there is a lot of time for Kalai Rosario. I think he's 20, and he was drafted in 2020, which means he lost development time. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm putting a death sentence on this guy's career, but he has a ton of swing and miss. And he might be the worst defensive outfielder I've seen in the Twins organization. It's bad. Maybe get better. Absolutely possible. But I don't see how he can, if he plays like I've seen him in the outfield, he's not going to be an outfielder. Put it that way. He strikes out a lot. But again, he's very young. Hit 12 home runs in the Florida State League last year, which 12 home runs doesn't sound like a ton. That's a lot for a guy his age in the Florida State League, a very pitcher-dominant league. So I do like Kalai Rosario, but if you've noticed, he's really gone down my prospect rankings, and that was the result of watching a lot of what I have available for Fort Myers last year and seeing a lot of bad defense, really bad defense. So I don't know why he's not going to start the year at AAA. I don't think he's not going to start the year at AA. We'll probably see him in Cedar Rapids. But he is definitely someone to watch. He's definitely someone who has built a Sire Fort Myers candidacy. So his profile's on the upswing. There's the compliment sandwich in between the dirt kicking. And again, he's very young. Very young. That's like a guy I would like put in ballet or something like that, which I'm sure that might not go over well, but like he just needs to get more in touch with his body moving around out there. But man, that guy can hit the crap out of the ball. Yeah. He has 2 opposite field home runs that were pretty impressive this spring. And that's a tool that can carry you, like we're talking about with Christian Encarnacion Strand. You hit enough, they'll figure something out. Right? The Twins team we're looking at right now doesn't have a DH. So yeah, you hit enough, you don't really have to play a position. You don't have to. It's good if you do. Most teams like to have that situation where they're rotating guys at DH. Yeah. I like Kalai Rosario. I just would don't hesitate on the helium. Put it that way. All right. So I wanted to talk about Jorge Alcala because he's a guy we've talked quite a bit about, and I think he's a really key piece to this bullpen. Hopefully, obviously, it's Duran, it's Lopez back to form, it's Jax, who I think actually is super underrated. Maybe not as much in terms of inside Twin circles, but man, Griffin Jax, and he's looking good this spring. Whew. So, if we could imagine Jorge Alcala getting back to what he was at the end of 2021, oh my goodness, this bullpen could be disgusting. But you know what? That doesn't even have to happen. That's sort of what I've been trying to, digest with his performance so far. And he's pitched well. What we're looking at here is Jorge Alcala's game log so far this spring. You see, he gave up a walk and a couple hits and 2 runs in his first outing there in February. but his last 3 outings have been tremendous. He's only given up 1 hit and walked 1 batter in 3 innings of work with 7 strikeouts. 7 strikeouts in 3 innings pitched. This is super encouraging no matter how you want to slice that. A couple of people have mentioned to me that he hit 98 in his first outing. I don't know. I didn't see that anywhere. Maybe he did. I'm not saying that they have bad information, but I can tell you there wasn't Baseball Savant data from that first outing, so we don't have that. But here is a look at a snapshot at some of the Savant data, the velocity that we have from his last 3 outings. So obviously the encouraging thing there is everything is moving up. So that's great to see. And, that's another thing too we kind of obsess about early is, kind of thinking of everything as being sort of solidified on opening day. And it's like, no, some guys are going to, continue to return to health or get better or add velo as even the season goes on. It's not like you hit game 1 and what you're getting is what you're getting. So we might see Alcala continue to ramp up. So again, we can take a look at this and say, well, he was averaging 97.4 miles per hour with his fastball in 2021. And, he's only been up to averaging 95.8. Well, that's not very good. And I think, that's true. You can't deny that he's below where he's been. But again, I'm taking the point that it's moving in the right direction already. Here we are on March 9th. There's only 3 weeks until opening day. And then, of course, he can continue to get better. He's healthy. We haven't heard anything about him, having any kind of difficulties. And then the last thing I wanted to put, you might be kind of interested in why that last column is fastball percentage. Because that's something I actually forgot about 2021 is this guy threw a ton of sliders. His primary pitch in 2021 was his slider. He's actually commanding his slider and his changeup very well in spring. So maybe even if the velocity kind of caps out maybe a mile per hour under where it was, it's maybe he can't kind of get to that level where we were envisioning. Maybe this is a potential future dominant closer, but he could be another guy in that 7th, 8th inning picture, which would be just miles ahead of where the Twins bullpen was at this time a year ago, before Duran and Jax established themselves, and Alcala being even serviceable will ensure that Emilio Pagan stays the hell out of high leverage situations. And there's some other guys that can kind of do that as well. I didn't even mention Caleb Thielbardt, how amazing he was last year. Obviously, Giovanni Moran showed some flashes. So, they don't need Jorge Alcala to be the guy. They need him to be a guy. It would be great if we see him come back, but, it's kind of a situation we'll continue to keep tabs on. I think that's one of the biggest players I wanted to see this spring, and that a guy who I'm paying the closest attention to is Jorge Alcala. But I'm pretty encouraged. I'm pretty encouraged so far at what we've seen from him. All right. Oh, you guys see more people want me to crush dreams. I mean, you've seen my prospect list. So where I have guys. Keone Cavaco. A lot of what I said about Kalai Rosario can apply to him. It's not like he can't get better, but he hasn't progressed as much as I would have liked. Obviously, COVID. This is another guy that's been really hurt by COVID. He was always kind of a project. He was always the guy that was going to need to play a lot, and him missing that time, being in competition, facing opposing pitching, I think did not help. I don't think you can blame all the shortcomings on that. He's moved from shortstop to third base. He's pretty good over there. He's got a good arm, athletic, makes some really nice plays out there. I believe he ended the season pretty well. Ooh, I know he had a good showing. I think the situation with Cavaco might have been he came back from an IL stint, looked good, and then kind of faded at the end of the year. He's yeah. I just he's outside of my top 30. Um, maybe that's as much as needs to be said about Cavaco, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, obviously this is sort of a half empty view for Louis Varland, but if we're talking about the bullpen and some bullpen upside, that's another thing to keep in mind. Maybe somebody else moves out there. Maybe it's Louis Varland. You know, if all the starters stay healthy, I mean Bailey Ober's looked awesome too, so he's going to get that first chance at the rotation. I don't think they're not going to do that on opening day. I don't think move any of these starting pitchers to the bullpen, except for maybe Josh Winder. I think he's maybe a guy they might do that with. But yeah, it's everything's going to kind of evolve as the year goes on, and the team we're looking at now is not going to be the team we're looking at the at the trade deadline or whatever else. So that's fun to think about. It's a little scary to think about. Who are we going to lose? Because you're going to lose guys. A lot of important pieces are going to go down as the year goes along. Dobnak. Where does Dobnak stand in my mind? Oh boy, that feels like a dangerous question. I daydream about maybe shaving into a Dobnak stash. That's definitely in my mind. Jealous of the flow. I don't know how often I've taken my hat off on the channel. Actually, I wear a hat like 99% of the time of my waking hours anyway. But definitely jealous of the Dobnak flow. That's in my mind. I love him. I love Randy Dobnak. I'm rooting for him. He's a junk balling guy. He's a junk balling guy. There's not a lot of velocity there. It's even lower than, when he was in the major leagues last. But the movement, he gets a lot of movement on his pitches still. Sinker gets a ton of movement. He's got a good slider. He's a piece. He's a piece. They're not going to be expecting anything from him at the major league level. Hopefully, if all goes well, we won't see Randy Dobnak, but you always see the Aaron Sanchez's, Derek Rodriguez's, Cole Sands from last year. There's always that emergency starter where it's like, well, we need a guy for length. And, this guy is the one who's pitched the farthest away. So he's got the freshest arm. He's coming. I assume we're going to, if Dobnak stays healthy, that's where we're going to see Dobnak. He'll get back. I would predict that at some point he'll get back on the 40-man roster. He'll pitch for the Twins in that kind of up and down role, and we'll see where it goes from there. I'm not imagining him kind of carving out another major role again, given the way this roster looks, but it's definitely possible. It's also kind of hard to envision. The bullpen would probably be the more likely place. Maybe the Twins want a long man or a 2-inning guy, and that could be somewhere where he could come into a role that they really haven't had before, but kind of thinking of him in like a traditional reliever role. I don't see him pulling like a Griffin Jacks of like converting, at least right now. Maybe he could do that down the road. A lot of those guys take a long time to kind of get up to that point. So, because he can move the baseball, man. Dobnak is great movement. Almost to his detriment, really. When we've seen him bad at the major league level, it's because he doesn't know where his stuff's going. It's breaking so far that he's not commanding it. I love Dobnak. I mean, I will go out to CHS Field just to watch Dobnak start this summer at some point, probably. Hopefully he's healthy, stays healthy. All right. We talked about the game. Twins beat the Dominican Republic 2-1. Not a whole lot to report outside of mainly Sonny Gray being awesome. Talked about Brooks Lee some. Every reason to be excited about Brooks Lee. That was so fun to see him in that last game we had highlights of, just showing it all. In the field, on the bases, at the plate. He really is a really well-rounded player. Can do a lot of things well. Talked about Jorge Alcala, who I'm really excited for. And rooting for, definitely. and answered some questions. I think, we usually go a little bit longer, but I might cut this one a little bit short. Quit while we're ahead. Well, maybe that. Um, well, here's a good one. Zachary, Donovan Solano. I mean, I would say the bench guys, they're going to be on the bench hopefully more often. I mean, Rocco's going to move guys around. Rocco's going to play guys a lot. You could definitely make the case for, say, Edouard Julien being in Donovan Solano's spot. Oh man, we're not gonna be done now, because now this we're getting back into the AA AAA question, and something I've actually been meaning to talk about. That's something that I was interested in last year. Is we talked about, maybe you only want like a month of a guy in AAA, maybe, before you kind of are looking to bring him up to the big leagues for the first time. Kind of felt like that should have been the last month of last year for Edouard Julien. And if you look at who was playing for the Saints at the end of the year, the Twins were moving all sorts of guys up there. Like Dalton Shuffield, who was drafted last year, played for the Saints just because they needed a guy like that, an infielder. There were some other guys that Jake Rucker moved up, I think, from Cedar Rapids and just jumped up there because they needed a guy. There were a few guys that the Saints just kind of pulled guys up because they did. I don't think they wanted to disrupt Wichita's roster, maybe because they were in a playoff run trying to win the Texas League championship. You think, that stuff doesn't matter, but it does to some degree. And you want to keep good relationships with your affiliates and keep those teams happy and stuff. So maybe that's the route, if you want to take sort of the positive route, maybe that's the reason why Edouard Julien stayed at AA last year. That could very well be. But if we're talking about, his proximity to the major leagues, I think he should have been at AAA and getting maybe that month in at AAA last year or whatever. And then coming into camp, added to the 40-man roster, not really penciled into a spot, but certainly a guy that you're looking at as, we're not gonna totally close the door on this. So I think that's interesting. I'm kind of curious maybe what the Twins think of Edouard Julien. Again, not that anybody needs a certain amount of time in AAA. That's not really required. Edouard Julien's such a good hitter that I don't think it really matters that much. But hopefully Donovan Solano doesn't have so big of a role. Again, that's what you would want. If you were bringing up like an Edouard Julien, you kind of want him to play almost every day. Almost every day. Nobody really plays every day anymore. But you want a young guy like that playing almost every day. If you want to make Edouard Julien a second baseman and make that stick, obviously you hope Jorge Polanco's playing second base almost every day. Doesn't really give him an opportunity to continue to improve at that position. It's another thing about Edouard Julien last year to keep in mind. Only played second base. The year before that, he played first base, second base, third base, outfield. They had him all over the place, which seems very like opposite of Twins. And most teams really these days, to take a guy who you had playing all over the place and then really hone him into one position primarily last year was interesting. And I kind of took that to think that they think that's his best position, that he will be an everyday major leaguer as a second baseman potentially. They kind of want to make that work, sort of like with Austin Martin at shortstop. Now whether that happens for Julien, I don't know. He's pretty fringy at second base as a major leaguer. I think he can get away with it there, but especially with the shift restrictions, you need a lot more athleticism at that position these days. We'll see, but that's what I would say. If you're looking at really any Donovan Solano, Michael A. Taylor, Kyle Farmer, and kind of being like, I wish we had a path for the younger guys to take. I would say, these guys aren't taking hopefully huge roles. And number two, the Twins have kind of tried that. And with like Nick Gordon, it worked really well last year. With Alberto Celestino, it hasn't worked as well. Kind of counting on him as sort of primary Buxton insurance has hurt them. He hasn't been able to really step up. And that happens to like Ryan Jeffers, trying to make Ryan Jeffers into an everyday catcher, basically. That just hasn't worked. So they went out and got Vasquez. So I think, it is going to be tough for young guys to break into this team this year. It's probably going to take injuries to like a long-term injury to an everyday player potentially. But let's be honest, that stuff happens. That stuff happens pretty regularly. Um, the Twins have some kind of injury-prone dudes. Twins have some guys that have basically chronic issues now. I don't, things, opportunities will come up, and these guys are going to have to take them. Nobody made plans for Luis Ariz. I don't know. He's my favorite example of this now, and I know we're all stinging from him not being around. As much as Pablo Lopez seems like an awesome dude, and I'm excited to have him on the Twins, and those prospects are great. Still gonna tremendously miss Luis Ariz. And remember, in 19, there was no plans made for Luis Ariz. Jonathan Scope got injured. They called up Ariz. He played well. They said, "Oh, what the hell are we going to do now?" They said, "Well, you want to play left field?" And Luis Ariz played left field. Never really done it before. Played left field. Of course, he ended up playing some third base, but they never had made any path for him. So that's what these guys are probably going to have to do. The minor leaguers on the Twins that are kind of on the cusp of the big leagues, they're going to have to earn it. And I mentioned how some of the other guys that haven't, Alex Kirilloff and Trevor Larnach, and it's mostly health, of course. And hopefully we see them take the reins of an everyday major league job this year. But, sometimes leaving those opportunities open for prospects, minor leaguers, really blows up in your face. Austin Martin's going to be a major leaguer. I can tell. I can pretty much guarantee you that, but it's my confidence in that is mostly based off of his athleticism, his ability to put together good at bats, work a walk. I don't know. I wouldn't say like Austin Martin is going to have a 100 OPS at the major league level ever. I'm not saying that's not going to be a thing. He could certainly, he's evolving. He's evolving a little bit, maybe more than you'd want a guy of his profile, a former college guy at a big college program. You'd figure kind of at this point in his professional career, he'd kind of have a more solidified idea of who he is as a hitter. But we were getting there. That's kind of the thing about his injury, and don't really have anything else to provide. We talked about that mainly in our Member Monday video, which covered a ton of topics. If you're a channel member, you saw that. Talked about Austin Martin a bit. It's a UCL sprain, I think is what they called it. So obviously it's really hard to not think Tommy John, which obviously that would be him losing a year, and that would be really tough, for a guy who just built up some momentum in the Arizona Fall League, changed his stance and his swing a little bit. Was really looking forward to see what he was going to do. So hopefully that was just super precautionary and he's going to be okay. Is kind of where we're at there. Not sure. All right. That's it. We're calling it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for hanging out. I had a great time. Always do on these live streams, covering lots of topics. You always bring great questions. We have lots of discussions I didn't even plan on getting to, and lots of interesting thoughts come from your side. So really appreciate it. I'm going to try to keep doing these live streams. I think it's not going to be on a set day. It's just kind of whatever fits best, but probably either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday each week, even into the season. I'm hoping. So we shall see, but that's going to do it for this one. Really appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll talk again soon.